This is sort of an introduction video to key vocabulary that we're going to use in this next standard. So here's our standard for 7th grade here. Use facts about supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent angles in a multi-step problem to write and solve simple equations for an unknown angle in a figure. We are definitely going to focus on supplementary, complementary, vertical, and what adjacent angles are. And we will write simple equations. We'll see about multi-step ones, okay? First, we're going to talk about angles. We want to talk about how we talk about angles, okay? Well, an angle is created by two different line segments that intersect, right? Or two different lines. And so what we do is we measure sort of the part of a circle that it creates when it does this. So when we talk about this angle here, we're talking about from A, right? A to B to C, the angle that's sort of created here, right? And if you notice, I draw sort of like this arc here, and that's to indicate that it's part of a circle, okay? Now, how do we talk about this angle? Well, in this case, we're going to talk about this angle as its angle A, B, C, okay? And you can think of it as almost like 3 points. Here's point A, here's point B, here's point C, and it's the angle created by connecting those three. So from A to B to C, I'm creating this angle, and that's what this is saying, okay? So this is angle ABC. Now, sometimes you'll also see that, the shortcut way of this would be just saying angle B. And in this case, that should be relatively obvious, because if I'm looking from point B here, there's an angle created, and it's the only one here, so it can't be confused, okay? And you'll see later in some of the other examples that sometimes what will happen is you will be confused, and so, or you're not totally sure what angle B is, so you're going to have to use all three of those. Okay, another thing we have to worry about is this little m here, okay? And so when you see m, it's asking you to find the degrees, right? Like how many degrees are created by this angle. And typically what a degree is it means it's part of a circle, and we'll explain and explore that a little bit more in class. I don't want to just tell you what they are. Let's go ahead, let's look actually what this angle measure is. And so in order to do that, I'm going to use this tool. Hopefully you've seen this thing before. It's called a protractor, right? And so I'm going to drag this over here, and what I'm going to do is this is going to allow me to find how much of a circle this creates, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to, let's see, how do I get, there we go. I'm going to need to rotate this over so that I can find the angle, okay, between, okay, these two lines. All right, so now this is, you'll notice it's either at 180 or 0, and so that's what I'm going to start at 0, and so I'm going to count up. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and this looks like it's at about 40, I don't know, about 42 or 43. Okay, so what we can say here is the measure of angle ABC is 43 degrees, okay? And that means this is saying the same thing. So the measure of angle B, how many degrees is it? Is 43 degrees, okay? And this is, a lot of this is just sort of terminology. It's sort of how we talk about these specific things, okay? So, yeah, there you have it. This is typically how we're going to talk about angles. All right, so let's move on. Okay, here we're going to start talking about this idea of complementary angles. Okay, so complementary angles are when two angles add up to 90 degrees. Okay, now you're going to want to pause this video a bunch of different times and make sure you put in these definitions, because I'm going to keep coming back to them, and I'm going to say something like, okay, it's time for you to, like look back in your notes and figure out what complementary means. I'm not going to consistently say, oh, complementary means if you add them up, it's 90 degrees. Okay, so this is something you're going to have to work on. Okay, make sure you write this down. Okay, so complementary angles, they add up to 90 degrees. In this case, I can't just talk about angle E, because I don't know, what does that mean? Is that this angle here? Is it maybe this angle created here? Or maybe it's this angle, right? And anytime you see that little box in there, that means that it's a right angle, which is 90 degrees. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, all right, I know that this one angle is 90 degrees, right? So I'm going to describe that as from D to E to F, right? So that would be angle, the measure of angle D, E, F is equal to 90 degrees. Okay. Now I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, well, this big angle, right, that DEF actually can be created, okay, as or split into these two other angles. And what I can say is I can say, all right, the angle, right, the measure of angle DEF, this one here, okay, sorry, nope, not DEF, sorry, DEG, okay, this one here, plus the measure of angle, this one, GEF, okay, together, that's going to equal 90 degrees also, okay, because those two angles, right, are split. Okay, if I have this big 90-degree angle and I draw a line, I'm breaking it up into two smaller angles, and together they equal 90 degrees. So what that means is this angle here, right, angle DEG, okay, and angle GEF, these are complementary angles, okay? Those are complementary angles because together, when I put them together, they equal a right angle, okay? And that's how this works. All right, moving on. Let's take a look here. Now we're going to talk about supplementary angles. Okay, so supplementary angles are when two angles, when you add them together, equal 180 degrees. Or another way of saying it is together they make a straight line. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say, okay, the measure of angle, and I'm going to look from W to X to Z, that's a straight line. So WXZ is the straight line. Well, straight angles are equal to 180 degrees. Okay, it's a straight line. Okay, and so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, if I create this new line, right, if I do X and I put this point out here, Y, and I make this, now I'm going to split it up into this angle here and this angle here. Okay, so then what I can say is, okay, angle WXY, so the measure of angle WXY, all right, and if I add that, okay, to this angle YXZ, the measure of angle YXZ, together those make 180 degrees, okay? These are supplementary angles, okay, because together they make a straight line. Right? And you'll get the hang of this. Really, a lot of it is, again, this terminology, this idea of describing it. Okay, so from W to X to Y, and we have to be very specific. We want to, you don't want to say, if you just say W to Y to X, that's actually a different angle than from W to X to Y. Okay. So you got to be, we'll practice this more in class, but I want you to get sort of through the definitions and just have a basic understanding of this so that when we talk about it in class, we can refer to it a little quicker, okay? So make sure you have a definition for supplementary angles, make sure you have one for complementary angles, what they mean, and a nice picture of it, okay? All right. Finally, let's talk about this idea of vertical angles. Okay, so vertical angles are if I have two lines, right, and I cross, what it's going to say is the lines, in fact, let's do this. Let me, I'm going to rotate this line a little bit so it makes it a little bit easier to see here, okay? And I'll drag O here and put M here. Okay, so what I'm going to say is the opposite angles, right? So the ones that are sort of across from each other, right? So like these across from here, these angles, right? So this angle and this angle, and what this means is these are vertical, okay? And vertical angles are equally to each other, okay? They're across from each other, okay? And they are equal to each other, okay? And that should sort of make sense. It sort of looks the same, and there's a whole system of ways that we can prove it using geometry. We're not going to bother with that right now, okay? So right now I can say my vertical angles here are, so I have angle, okay, MPN, we'll call that one MPN, and I have angle LPO, and what I'm going to say is the measure of these are equal to each other, okay? I know that they're the exact same. The measure of them are equal to each other, okay? Another way of saying it is if I wanted to not talk about the measure, I could say angle MPN is congruent, okay? That's what this symbol means right here, okay? This symbol here means congruent. And that's a fancy way of saying equal. Okay, that means they're the same. So the angle MPN is congruent to angle LPO. All right. So this is saying they are the same angle. Okay, and this one is saying the measure. So the actual degrees, like if I gave it a value, a number. So if this one was 120 degrees, this one would also have to be 120 degrees. Okay. Well, then why don't you pause the video and you try to identify and name the other two vertical angles here. Okay, so the other vertical angles I have here are going to be this one and this one. Okay, so I have right now I'm going to have let's write it using congruence. So I'm going to say LPM. All right, so the angle LPM is going to be congruent right there. It's equal to OPN. Angle OPN. Okay, you got to be careful when you use these symbols. We got to make sure that we're sort of very neat when we do this, so that this angle and my L don't get confused. Okay, and oftentimes we actually don't use L for that reason, but okay. And then let's talk about the angle measure. So my angle, the measure of angle LPM is going to be equal to the measure of angle OPN. So if this angle is 40 degrees, this angle will also be 40 degrees. Okay, and that's vertical angles. All right, so what I want you to do here is, I didn't actually put the letters in. I sort of simplified this a little bit, and I said angles 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. And what I want you to do is I want you to find the other angle measures. Okay.